Global mobility is, in my eyes, so much more than relocating employees. Global mobility is one of the only areas of the business that touches so many other areas.
So I'd say my top tip for someone who's moving individuals to the US would really be to don't make assumptions that it's easy to integrate into the US culture. I think a lot of Americans can think that, oh, it's America, it's easy to integrate into, everything's easy to figure out. But what I've found from my experience is it's not easy, and it is very different from a lot of countries and a lot of cultures. So make sure that you're providing your assignees with the right resources to really be able to get settled and integrate into the new location, because it is much more difficult than I think any of us would assume.
I think what's important is to ensure that there is due diligence done with respect to what all is involved, whether that be ensuring that they have adequate cultural training, whether that be potentially considering the need to provide some sort of interest-free loan from a company standpoint to ensure that they are able to secure a car or to secure a home even. And ensuring that they have destination services. So someone who is helping them through facilitating setting up a bank account, helping them to facilitate figuring out how to mail something. Where's the closest grocery store? All of these things may, to you or I, come as something that is taken for granted, essentially. But to another country, and particularly in the US, I think there can be some challenge and confusion that comes with it. And so I think providing adequate support is a necessity.
Definitely over communication. I can't tell you how many times people who are moving are frustrated because they didn't know what was going on, in their move or the process. So I think over communication with the people moving, with the HR teams, with the companies, with your vendors, just making sure that everyone is on the same page and you understand, what are all the moving parts, who's responsible for what, and you have timelines. So communication along with timelines. And sometimes it's just asking, the person moving, do you want to be on all the communications? Are you aware of everything that you need to do? Just checking in with them. Sometimes there's no update, the case is still processing, but it's a no update is almost still as good as a real update. I've seen, especially now that we get updates immediately when our things are ordered, or when our food is ordered and it's being delivered to us. We just love that constant update, email that says, we got your order, So I think that's what employees are expecting as well now that are moving. They want to see that communication that's almost like a no update.
I think it's really important to set expectations with assignees from the beginning of assignment relocate, and really partnering with the right providers in the US to help ease the transition. So specifically what I've found is individuals have challenges when they come to the US with getting driver's license and social security numbers, and it always takes longer than they had planned, and they have to set aside a lot of time. So preparing them in advance for the different things that they'll have to do when they get here, I think really helps to make the transition more smooth. In addition, partnering with destination service providers who can guide the assignee through that process has really proven to be valuable and has helped a lot of them to save time and frustration instead of having to go and do those things on their own. I think two of the biggest challenges with working in global mobility in the USA are tax and immigration, which is a common theme, I think, anywhere you go. But as most people know, immigration in the US has been increasingly more difficult over the last several years. And there have been a lot of times and places where we've had to really think strategically on how we can find the right visa type for individuals to come and work in the US. And then, of course, over the last year or so, we've had even more challenges with a lot of restrictions. We're hoping that, in the coming years in the new administration, immigration will start to turn in the direction where it's more supportive for relocating assignees. But that's definitely an area of challenge. In addition, tax is an area where we find a lot of challenges. Individuals coming to the US aren't quite as familiar with our tax system, and that can pose some certain challenges to the individuals. Really, from an understanding perspective, there is a lot of education that goes into teaching assignees how the US tax system works. I see some of the benefits of working in global mobility in the US is really opportunity. I find a lot of individuals coming from all parts of the world who are really seeking just the opportunity to live and work in the US. There's a lot more flexibility from employment perspectives as far as at-will employment can be seen as a positive and a negative, but it really does give a lot of individuals the freedom to choose where they want to live and what they want to do. I'd say the US is attractive for a lot of global mobility programs because the cost in a lot of locations is actually a lot lower. So when you look at potentially sending someone to, let's say, the UK versus a city in the US like Houston, the cost of an assignment in general could be a lot lower. And that's because the cost of living in a lot of US cities is certainly lower than a lot of different global locations and hubs where individuals are often sent. So I do think that's an advantage that a lot of companies can take when they do send individuals to the US. On the reverse, I do think immigration can, in some ways, be easier to get to in the US. Depending upon the visa type and the requirements, there can be opportunities not only for an individual to work in the US, but also an accompanying spouse. And I think that can make the US attractive for a lot of families if they have dual career spouses and both want to be able to work. There is that opportunity under certain visa types. So I think from a cultural perspective, the US is a very attractive location for a lot of individuals just because of the massive amount of cultural diversity. So depending upon where you go, most major cities are going to have a huge variety of different cultures. And you'll see that not only in restaurants, but in shops and certain locations and neighborhoods. So it's a way for individuals to really be exposed to a lot of different cultures, but also find individuals who are of the same culture that might help them to be able to integrate a little bit more easily into the US culture and kind of have that opportunity to connect with others and then connect with others who may be from different countries and different cultures while they're in that location.
Typically, your markets, when you think about it, US is, if not the largest market, it's usually going to be one of the largest markets for a business. So bringing in key executives, people that they are looking to promote within the organization, and to give them the opportunity to work here in a multicultural, very dynamic market, it is a great development opportunity. So thinking about how they want to build their talent pipelines, what they want to do in terms of maybe expansion, having that US experience becomes very critical for those top rising executives or for those that they're really looking to be the highest level of leadership. It also is great for building the brand, building the name, and showing the investment of the organization to have a global presence in the US. Because you're also bringing, especially for companies that may be headquartered outside the US, to have those leaders come into the US, it's also bringing the culture of the organization better to the US market. I think that you can't ask enough questions. Because the more that you ask questions of the assignee and help them to dive into maybe some of their concerns, their fears, their family dynamics, anything that's going to potentially be that risk factor of a failure, that's going to really help to also create a better relationship while hopefully helping to avoid a failed assignment. Because those questions, an assignee just doesn't know what to expect. And I think that that's one of the places where I often start, because as a former assignee myself, I knew I didn't know what to expect. Even though we moved around the world and lived in Belgium, Venezuela, Ecuador, back to Venezuela, I didn't know what to expect each time we moved. If somebody would have said to me, what is your most important possession? I could have named a ton of things, but after nearly losing my household goods 3 times, now it's just stuff. So, by the time I came back, I learned a different perspective, and each move is different. So listening and asking questions, finding out where they are on their journey. How many times have they moved? What's their family dynamic? Has that changed? Who do they have at home? Do they have ailing parents at home? Anything that you can find out is going to help you to be the best supporting global mobility professional to them and really enhance that employee experience.
One of the key challenges that had been top of mind for the past several years was just having to navigate through U.S. immigration, a lot of the changes that have occurred, having to stay on top of those changes, having to determine how best to mitigate any impact to our employee population as a result of those changes, and ensuring that we're keeping our employees, our business partners, our HR partners fully updated with respect to what we're doing and how we are continuing down that path of ensuring support of employees and business continuity. I think that one of the things that makes it so attractive is the level of support that provided from a mobility perspective when coming to the US. I can think back to a previous organization that I worked for that was a very large global organization, and in speaking with my colleagues that worked in other countries and comparing of benefits and support provided from an assignment standpoint, it was arguably night and day. And night and day in the sense that the US support was just much greater.
Some of the key challenges are the immigration reform. Like, there aren't often US immigration reforms, so it's hard sometimes to move people and that you want to come to the US. You have to use the existing visa categories or pathways. There aren't often opening up ways for immigration. Also, the US, like many other countries, have their immigration policies were based on more historical right to works and office, people going to the office. They haven't really gotten up to speed of the remote workers or people, working from home. And I think some of those challenges are just going to make the US be a little bit behind. Another challenge is the US is paper-based. So if there's any immigration attorneys, you know what I mean by all the paperwork and filings that you do, the checks that you have to get when you file a petition. So other countries like the Singapore and the UK, they're all online filings. So I think that's one of the challenges in the US, that they're just behind the times a little bit on technology, but I know they're working on it. USCIS, the immigration agency in the US, is working on accepting credit cards, and making some forms digital, but it's nowhere near some of the other countries that companies are sending people to. The rewards with moving to the US often it's the headquarters for some of these multinational companies. So there's more opportunities. There's that prestige that people think there is with working in the headquarters. I'm close to the CEO or I'm close to the president. Sitting here in the US or in the headquarters. And so I think that's one of the rewards. Also, if the team is in the US, majority of the team is in the US, sometimes it's just easier. I feel like I have colleagues who are outside of the US on my team that I try to incorporate, as much as possible in all of our team meetings. Time zone, I'm cognizant of their time zone. So I think some people just see like being in the same area and time zone as their leadership teams or their manager as a reward and a benefit. Often the headquarters is based in the US, so a lot of the operations is in the US, and most of the time when people or companies are sending foreign nationals, on assignments or internal transfers, they're not at entry level. They're usually high up, VPs or leaders, because it costs a lot. The tax equalization or the immigration costs. It's a large cost for the business, so the business wants to send, people who are leaders in certain positions. So I think they go to the U.S. because of the leadership opportunities in the headquarters. I also think the U.S., a lot of people see it, as the land for dreamers and to start, settle down and create a new life. So I even have colleagues, who want to come to the U.S. because they think once they've come to the U.S., they've made it. So I think it's just that mentality of immigrants, making their success stories in the U.S. Like my family comes from a family of immigrants as well. And so coming to the U.S. was an opportunity for them to establish themselves and to also, make a difference for their families' lives.
I think it's mostly the opportunity, as when you move to the US, and obviously depending on the size, the company, the role, moving to the US just doesn't encompass one opportunity, but it's a set of opportunities, especially if the company is actually headquarters in the United States. We move folks to the US for a particular role, and there is tons of opportunities for them to move within the US to a different department to enhance really those talent movement within the United States. And I think because of the power of the country and size of the country, that's natural comes with the more opportunities also from a talent movement side. I would definitely say explore the local areas. Because US is huge, US is very diverse, many areas are very different from each other, especially for international assignees moving to the US. It is important that they really understand where they want to be, what the state or area looks like. And I know that's probably also relevant for other countries, but specifically in the US, where often for the US, they are just the metropolitan areas seen as those traditionally expat areas. For somebody moving to areas outside of the metropolitan areas, it is important for them to understand the local specifics as well. So I would say due diligence into a small geographical area where folks are moving to.
I think bringing people into the U.S. does have its own distinct challenges. The first and foremost, and it's critical and a big problem, is that these employees don't have a U.S. credit history. So the things that you need to do to get settled in easily and quickly into the United States become very difficult. You might have to get a guarantor to sign a lease. You might not be able to get a credit card. It's going to be hard to get an auto loan for the car that you want to buy. So it becomes up to the responsibility of the mobility practitioner to make sure that they can source appropriate resources to help overcome that challenge. I think what makes the United States attractive to mobility programs is the country is huge. And once people set foot on the ground in the US, it opens up a whole world of opportunity for them. Maybe they moved here to be located in Massachusetts, for example. Well, now they have the opportunity to see New York, to see Canada, to go visit Disney World in Florida. And it's very easy to do once you're actually in the United States. So there's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of ways to experience regional variations, but all within the United States. So I'd say the best advice I could give to a global mobility professional who's moving people into the United States is that, number one, they need to be on top of our U.S. immigration laws. They can change quickly, so it's important to have a good relationship with your immigration provider and understand exactly how the different visas work and what the timings could be. And addressing the fact that the employees won't have a U.S. credit history, and how are you going to help them get certain things done in order to set up their home in the United States. And learning and understanding how the taxation works in the U.S.
immigration is one of the challenge, and especially during the pandemic, right? We all facing that challenge. I think it's also worldwide too, and it's changed every day. The taxation, because U.S. is the global taxation country, and is adding more layers to when you trying to moving employee or assignee from country to countries, and adding more complication in that. One of the rewards I find is that's priceless is you have the opportunity to meet a lot of people worldwide. Those are the knowledge, those are the experience is priceless, right? I think people recognize it. This is the opportunities. A wide window for you to learn more from this culture, from the US perspective. You have an open mind. Expect some unexpected. In the US, our culture is very individualism. You have to have an open mind when you come to the US to look at the culture, to look at even from the business perspective, right? The way the US people running their business, you may not find that similar to where you come from. So you may be disappointed, but always have an open mind.
There are many, many challenges currently for Destination USA when it comes to immigration. There are severe backlogs with the US government in approving immigration cases. There are severe backlogs with US embassies and consulates around the world with securing interview appointments for employees who need to apply for work visas. It can be easier when it is easier to get into the United States. Pre the pandemic, it was one of the easier countries to be able to get into. There are many different types of visa options available for different types of employees around the world. So the US immigration system is vast. Those are some of the key benefits. Some of the US immigration work visas have benefits that allow spouses to work. So that's definitely a big attraction for assignees who look to the US, to take part in assignments here in the US. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, a lot of that has been, backlogged, as I just mentioned. But I think overall, even, as we're now trying to get back to some level of normalcy, there is still a lot of keen interest. There are still a lot of employees and assignees around the world who are still looking to move to the US and be able to come here, take on assignments, and be successful in whatever they do. So there are a lot of benefits. There's also, the option to pursue a green card if one wants to come and live and stay here permanently. So there are a multitude of advantages, except for what we're dealing with currently. My top tip would be to have a discussion before thinking of moving an assignee. Reach out to the global mobility team. Discuss the logistics of moving that assignee, discuss immigration, discuss relocation, discuss tax implications. Quite often, discussions start without involving global mobility, and then global mobility are sort of contacted halfway through the process, and then it's, we run into issues all because we weren't aware, and then when we start providing the appropriate guidance and advice, and it's like, oh, and the teams that were working on this, there's a realization that, okay, maybe we shouldn't have done this. We should have notified global mobility first. So I would say the top tip is don't do anything without informing global mobility, because there are lots of challenges, complications, and compliance risks.
I think the rewards of having a US-based mobility program is the ability for us to bring talent from all parts of the world to the US, different perspectives, cultures. I think the challenges that we often face here in the US is that we, have a tough US immigration system. It's getting increasingly more difficult to get visas for our employees to come and to work legally here in the US. I think depending where you are in the US, we can run into challenges around cost of living or maybe a lack of homes on the market to purchase. But again, at the same time, I find that the U.S. is a melting pot, and again, going back to culture, being able to bring that culture together in a way that really, I think, just increases and enhances your company's culture overall. I think the U.S. is popular from a headquarters perspective just because of the talent. There is a lot of really great talent in the U.S. You find that even foreign nationals from India, from China, from Europe want to come to the U.S. and learn at our universities. So the talent pipelines, there's just a lot of really great talent to choose from. Anytime I'm moving an assignee to the U.S., I want to make sure that they understand the cultural differences between the U.S. and the country that they're coming from. So I would say that would be my best tip, just ensuring that you're providing really strong cultural training before the employee moves.
Thank you for listening to this GMJ episode on global mobility in the U.S.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much for listening in today. I hope that you've learned something new and exciting. And I hope that you'll continue to listen in on this series and learn from others.
Thank you for tuning in to this latest GMJ episode on global mobility in the USA.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for your attention. Ďakujem za pozornosť.
Thank you for listening.